welcome to our core teachings class. We have an attendance sheet over there. If you could put your name on, we'll just pass the paper over. Yeah. And yeah, it's already 1. We'll start with the class. Thank you everyone for joining with us for our core teachings class. And this class is meant to be an introductory class for Buddhism, but it was already been happening for quite a few months actually, and this is our 8th class. And in this core teachings, just to sort of recap, we are talking about the basic methods of how do you practice in Buddhism, as in the goal is enlightenment in Buddhism, so how do you go about it? And the steps to that is first the practice of morality or precept, and then we go on to practice meditation, which is basically what we're talking about today, the effects of meditative concentration. And then at the final phase where we arrive at developing or discovering our own intrinsic wisdom, our own intrinsic nature, that what the Buddha called the Buddha nature that exists within all sentient beings. So now we are at week 8, and the title of this week's topic is The Good Life, which is the effects of meditative concentration. And so this, another thing to point out is this class or this lecture is based upon the book we see over here, For All Living Beings, A Guide to Buddhist Practice. And this is a book written by our late master, our founder, Venerable Master Xingyun. And so all the text is basically, you can see it both in the physical book as well as an online version that exists in the FoGuangHuB. And so in this chapter, the Venerable Master is talking about we all live in this world, and because we live in this world, we cannot separate ourselves from society, from our family, nor can we ignore the material world, the secular world of money and wealth. So in the outside world, we constantly face with the 5 desires, which is wealth, sex, food and drink, fame, sleep. And also internally, we are confronted with the things that we see, we hear, smell, taste, touch, and think about. So this 6, the see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and the thought, is basically the 6 sense object, which is the sight, sound, smell, taste, touchable objects, and thoughts that we chant in the Heart Sutra. That's the 6 sense objects, which is a terminology in Buddhism. But however, what gives us the most pressure and is hardest to deal with is what that is inside. Our default thoughts of the 3 great poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. So this is why we meditate and practice Buddhism, to give ourselves mental defense and spiritual armor to strengthen the power of mind so that we can deal with both all of these external factors as well as the internal factor of greed, anger, and ignorance. So how can we counter the 5 desires or the 6 sense objects, and also our greed, anger, and ignorance, the 3 poisons? So the Diamond Sutra says the mind should not abide in all of those, the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or dharmas, which are thoughts. This means that the mind should not become fixated on any of the 6 sense objects. It should not become attached to these external form or appearances, the appearances that we take as truth, we take for granted as this is how it should be. This is because, as it's said elsewhere in the sutra, any notion of a self, of a person, of a sentient being, or a being with a lifespan is it should be taken as real. It should be taken as illusory, and it's something that is temporary. So, and each of these six senses is defiled or contaminated. It's not as pure as we thought, because the thing that we perceive from the exterior world, it go through a filter that is our mind, our thought, and our thought might be biased. And thus the six senses will be in turn be defiled or contaminated as a result. So when we have greed, attachment, and anxiety towards our mental states and hold to the notion of a self, we will develop wrong view, as in we will not be able to see it truthfully. So these wrong views naturally will give rise to a defiled and diluted thoughts. So this is the internal and external interacting between each other. And if we are not able to have a right view, then naturally we won't have a pure and a truthful thought. And the Diamond Sutra also says that let the mind be present without any abode. That is, not having any attachment, not dwelling in any of our thoughts, any of ideas that have been given to us. For the mind must be able to abide nowhere before it can resist the five desires and the six sense objects. So this is the only way we can find freedom in every thought. So there's the story about this old Chan master in ancient times, Chan master Dao Shu, and his disciples built a monastery that just happened to have a Taoist temple as a neighbor. So there's a rivalry that's happening between the two. And so the Taoists did not look kindly on having the Buddhists next to them and use their magic spells to harass and terrorize the Buddhist practitioners. Some of the younger novices were frightened away as a result, but the Chan master, Dao Shu, continued to reside there for the next dozens of years. And so in the end, the Taoists exhausted all of their powers, and they finally realized that all they could do was to move their own temple to somewhere else, because none of those magic spells worked. None of it frightened him. And so someone asked the Chan master, the Taoists have used their extensive supernatural abilities and their mystical powers are limitless. How were you able to defeat them? What is your secret? So the Chan master replied, I had no ability that could defeat them. The only thing I had was nothing. That is a mind of nothing. How could you defeat them with nothing? Like, you have nothing. How could nothing defeat nothing? So Dao Shu explained the Taoists had something. They have all the skills, all their spells, all the things in the world. They had all these powers, but something always has a limit and has boundaries. It is finite and can be exhausted. But on the other hand, if you had nothing, which has no limits and no boundaries, it is infinite and inexhaustible. So the relationship between nothing and something is the same as the relation between the unchanging and changing. Of course, what is unchanging will win rather than something that will always change. So the mind of nothing is the mind of meditative concentration. We can call it any other way, the mind of mindfulness, the mind of Chan, the mind of Zen. This is the no mind. So this no mind is the best way to deal with deluded thoughts. For no mind is a mind that is unshakable, that is unchanging. When we use this no mind, we see that when we have the chance to be rich or famous, it is the best time to do good deeds, be generous to other people, and cultivate the bodhisattva path of benefiting others. So when we face problem and suffering, it is the best time to develop our body and mind and to build our resolve the best way we can. And we know that the world is filled with trials and tribulations, and each is an opportunity to become detached from worldly illusions. Without craving for or attachment to anything in the world, one will remain unmoved by the eight winds, which is another terminology that stands for in the ups and downs of the world. Whether you gain something, you lose something, defamation, you're honored, praise, ridicule, sorrow, and joy. So you can see those are come in pairs. You gain something, you lose something, you've been defamed, you've been honored, praised, you've been ridiculed, and there's also the feeling of sorrow versus joy. So this is the power of meditative concentration. You will look past all of those. You look past the ups and downs, and you will be unmoved because you know that there is this state of mind. It's the state of nothing that are able to support this meditative concentration. So our bodies need power before they can shoulder a heavy load. So it's the same way that our mind needs power to be able to resist the various hardships of life. So how can we make our mind powerful? The Buddha Sutra says that there are 4 kinds of power we must possess. So the first of these is the power of understanding. This means the power of understand questions thoroughly. When something is completely understood, it is easy to put into practice. And by developing our power of understanding, we enhance our practice. So this is basically, okay, should be good. This is basically about our ability to hear the Dharma. That is when we go to classes, when we are attending Dharma talks, Dharma speech, we're able to hear it, to absorb it, and to be able to digest it. And when you're able to digest it and put it into your own terms of understanding, then you will truly be able to understand rather than just to get all the information in without truly understanding it. But if we are able to understand it, then our practice will become more firm. And the second is the power of enjoyment. So the kind of power gives us an optimistic character. When we read a book, we should fully enjoy our reading. Likewise, when we work, we should enjoy our work. When we serve others, when we are volunteering, we should enjoy the service that we give to others. When we give, we should also enjoy our generosity. So it's basically saying that the practice of Buddhism is not all work and no play. We should enjoy the process. And just like what I've mentioned in the past session, in the last class, is that I think one of our students over here asked about, isn't Buddhism about diligence and always pushing yourself? Of course, it's about really being diligent and be able to push yourself. But there's also a limit of how we can exert ourselves. And we will need to understand that we will need to find the middle path as well. So that when we are able to still continuing push ourselves, but we also know how to give ourselves some time and to really rest ourselves and to really wind down. So the metaphor that I've used is one of the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha teaches one of his disciples that used to be a musician, and he told him that because he's always pushing himself up until the point that he doesn't feel that he's developing any more than he should. So he finally made a decision that he wanted to give up and just go back to his family life. So that is when the Buddha had heard of this, and he told this disciple of his to come to him and ask him, weren't you a musician before you had renounced and become a monk with me? So the person said, yes, I was a musician. So when you are playing this instrument, it's a string instrument, Indian instrument, string instrument. What happened if the string is too tight? So of course, the disciple answered, if the string is too tight, there is a chance that it might snap because of the tension when you play it. So that is no good, because if the instrument snaps every time, you have to retune it. And the Buddha asks again, what happens if the string is too loose? And the disciple answered, if it's too loose, you couldn't play any music, any note out of it. So there's no point in that instrument as well. So the Buddha answered him that this is the same way as our practice. If it's too tight, you might snap. If it's too loose, you won't have any result from it. So the main point of our practice is to find this middle path, this middle point that will really enable you to be diligent, but as well as enable you to enjoy the process as well. It's not just constantly pushing yourself up until the point that you feel that it's not an enjoyable process. It should be enjoyable, and you should be able to feel the joy of the Dharma as well. And the third one of these powers is the power of rest. Just as mentioned in the Chinese saying, there goes rest. We need to rest to go further. In the long journey, we need to rest on different stops. So we rest to enable us to go further. So sometimes we should always rest after we have carried a burden for a long while, so that our strength can recover. So that I think that explains it all. And the final power is the power of contemplation, which is the work of meditative concentration. With meditative concentration, the mind is not easily changed by the outside circumstances, that is the eight winds, the ups and downs. Our minds cannot be changed in this way, and we are instead able to change these circumstances because we understand that our ups and downs in this world, in this life, and these are all temporary states. So if we are able to understand that and be able to give ourselves these power, then we are able to sustain ourselves with the power of the mind. So meditative concentration, the practice of meditative concentration, the goal of it is exactly that. So the effects is quite miraculous. Once it is developed, things seems lively and natural. You won't see everything as rigid, as mechanical. So daily life develops a sense of clarity, and you no longer worry about material concerns. The world is filled with a sense of vitality that can repair the disorder of modern people's life, the lives that we're living. Meditative concentration can transform delusion into enlightenment and false ideas into correct understanding, what is small into what is great, and suffering into happiness. So these might sound to be a bit far-fetched, because these are the state of a person that had attained meditative concentration. And when we are able to practice it, then you will see these effects that are actually changing or benefiting you in your daily life. So when learning about Buddhism, some people may read the Buddhist Sutra or listen to some teachings, but they may not have much insight. You might not really regurgitate it or really try to absorb all of these dharmas. As soon as something comes up, they feel confused and are again filled with delusion. So one may seem enlightened in speech, like if you're trying to just repeat all the teachings that have been taught to you, you're generally parroting it. You're being a parrot that is repeating what a human being is saying. But the deluded you will still become deluded when facing life circumstances. So you're not actually be able to turn all those teaching into action and be able to really make some changes in your own life. And this is why Buddhism emphasizes both understanding and practice. When you're able to understand a certain teaching, it's important that you're able to put those teaching into practice. So it's not enough to speak like an enlightened person. One must have a mind that is unshakable in all circumstances, in a certain sense, to test yourself with the things that you had learned. To practice meditation and become enlightened, one must have an unshakable mind. And so this, to our founder, is extremely important. When you do not know enough about yourself, your mind cannot feel independent, or it won't be free. You will be easily influenced by all these external circumstances. A single word of praise will make you glow with pride, while an ill-spoken word, sometimes it's unintentional, will stir resentment and anger from you. So when this happens, your joy, happiness, sorrow, or suffering is totally under the control of others or external factors, external circumstances. So in a sense, you have already completely lost yourself. There's no control. So in this world, as long as we have the distinction between the self and the others, or the you and I, there will be duality. And we will not have this sense, this understanding of emptiness. Whether it's emptiness or nothingness, it's actually the same idea that we shouldn't see the existence of the two, like there is me and there's you. So whenever there's a distinction between ordinary beings and Buddhas, there can be no equality. So if we're able to look past this, only then that true equality will exist. And meditation seeks to create equality where there seems to be duality, and unification where there is differentiation. So this is the wisdom of meditative concentration. So the wisdom of meditative concentration has the wondrous ability to illuminate the whole world, the whole universe. Having meditation as part of our daily life can have a profound and extraordinary effect upon us. Even in times of turmoil and upheaval, it can enable us to face life's hardship and remain composed by reducing our affliction, that is aforementioned greed, anger, and ignorance. With the wisdom of meditative concentration, we can remain unaffected by the right or wrong, or advantage or disadvantage, and the so on and so forth, gain, loss, honor, and disgrace. Even when dealing with hardship, stress, setbacks, and disappointment, we can have a positive mindset towards it. So the life of a Chan practitioner should be one of great compassion. It is a life where one liberates the world by taking on the hardship of living beings. Practicing meditation is not just about enjoying the bliss of meditative concentration or the joy of Dharma. Instead, one should cherish all living beings and seek to constantly refine yourself. So there's two elements to this. One is the benefiting the self through the practice, and the other is to benefit all other sentient beings, all living beings, by practicing the Dharma that you have learned. So Chan practitioners do not practice for the sake of their own enlightenment. So we must treat living beings with great compassion and the zeal of a bodhisattva, the diligence, the bravery, the courage of a bodhisattva, not to be selfish and only wish to liberate oneself, because liberating oneself, it's a practice of a Shravaka, or not a bodhisattva, but a bodhisattva they vow to not just liberate themselves, but also to aid in the liberation of others. So we must look inside ourselves and to also see our own faults. In that way, only in that way, we can renew ourselves through constant purification and practice such a way that we seek nothing outside of ourselves and turning from the internal and external, all the different factors that are constantly giving all these changing circumstances to us. So we must neither abide in samsara nor nirvana. So these two terminologies, nirvana is the state of enlightenment, as in when the Buddha had gained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he had already achieved towards nirvana. And a lot of people might understand nirvana as the passing of the Buddha. So the passing of the Buddha is the Buddha passing into parinirvana, which is the complete state of nirvana without remainder or without a physical body. So, but nirvana is a state that the Buddha had achieved when he was enlightened at the moment of his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. But he is enlightened with the state of nirvana with remainder, with a body that he still need to go through suffering of the body. And so that's nirvana. Samsara is the state of all other regular living beings, basically going through the cycle of birth and death. When we passes away, when we die, our consciousness are still quite actively attached to all of the world's different attachments. We will be led into the next round of rebirth. That is why it's called samsara, because samsara, it's a cycle of rebirth. It's also about wandering endlessly in this state of constantly being birthed into this world. So not abiding in samsara means using wisdom to transcend the cycle of rebirth. And not abiding in nirvana means using compassion to serve all living beings. And especially in Mahayana Buddhism, that the practice of bodhisattva, because it's not just solely for your own personal liberation, it's not just the liberation of self. So we should not abide in nirvana, as in there are still a practice that we need to perfect our own enlightenment, to perfect our wisdom, and to perfect our compassion as well. So this journey of a bodhisattva will eventually let them to become, at the end, like the Buddha himself, to be able to be self-enlightened, and at their final lifetime to be able to teach the Dharma to different beings. So for us, even though there is a chance for us to be enlightened, even in this lifetime, you might be diligently practicing and still have the chance of being able to be enlightened, but still that is the state of a Shravaka, or a hearer. You hear the Dharma, you practice the Dharma, and hence you are able to be enlightened. But for a Buddha is a self-enlightened person. So to be able to hear the Dharma, practice the Dharma, be able to be enlightened with it, you will still need to have the compassion to serve other people and to really build up your merits and wisdom in the process to be able to become a Buddha. So there's a lot of course, we won't go too deep into this whole doctrinal distinction between a Buddha or a Sravaka, but basically a bodhisattva needs to practice compassion as well as wisdom to be able to achieve towards the full state of Buddhahood. And upholding the precept in the process purifies the body and mind and makes it easier to develop meditative concentration. As mentioned, before we even start to practice meditation, it's good that we have a wholesome lifestyle, as in we will try to not indulge in all the different desires in life. We try to live a pure, wholesome life, that is where the Buddhist precept comes in. And when we are able to uphold these precepts and to purify both our body and mind, that process makes it easier to develop into the next stage of practicing meditative concentration. And so cultivating compassion allows us to feel empathy. So it's so that our meditation does not become like a dead piece of wood. It won't be static. It will be a state where when we become mindful, it's not just mindful of our own thoughts, it's also mindful of other people's suffering. And we are able to be mindful of what other people are going through. That will enable us to develop empathy and compassion and helps us to practice the path of a bodhisattva. And when we practice meditation, if we place too much emphasis on just compassion alone, it might become a misuse of compassion and will create, at the end, create obstacle for us instead. So, for example, and if we place too much emphasis on wisdom, the tranquility of our meditative concentration will become vacant and stagnant, and we might end up become cold and callous. So the cultivation, our practice should be placed on the middle path or the middle way. Compassion and wisdom must be practiced together, so that it's not constantly about being pitiful of or other people's like their state of the suffering they're going on. If you dwell in that, you might end up just doing a lot of charities, a lot of things that are more towards compassion, and that might not help with the development of wisdom. But if you emphasize too much of wisdom, you will think that it is not wise to constantly caring too much about what other people going through, and you might just focus on your own practice. And so this is where the balance hang. Like, we should really be able to practice both compassion and wisdom so that we are able to walk the middle path. And some people might think that monastics, monks and nuns, renounce the secular world and live a reserved life amid oil lamps and ancient Buddhas. That's a phrase from ancient times. And that it is a negative and pessimistic life that is withdrawn from the world. But for those that are being with us for some time, you might find that being a monastic is not what you think it's like. I've just mentioned that we just have our 35th anniversary celebration last weekend, and it's basically a fiesta. Like, we have performance going on at our courtyard. We need to arrange for the different celebrations that needs to go on. So all of these, it's not just meditation. It's also about how to bring in people and feel that they can be part of us. They can feel the joy, not just like the meditative joy, but the regular joy. They can celebrate with us. They won't feel that, oh, the Buddhism, this teaching is so high up there that it's not attainable. So for monastics, especially for our temple, that our founder had constantly been advocating and promoting about humanistic Buddhism, this is what we do. And I really hope that there's more students with us today, but a lot of our students, after they have since came to our class, had also joined in with our Buddhist Light International Association, which is our devotees club, so to speak, and they're having an annual meeting at down the hill. So I think that's a plus. I take that as a plus, as in, well, they are gaining the benefits, they're feeling the benefits of Buddhism, and they feel that they can really contribute more towards the community. So yeah, basically it's not all calm, peace, and tranquility, we are also quite active in the different events and activities that we do. So in reality, the only thing a monastic renounces are the illusion of the world that we thought we see. We let go of the scheming and for our own advantage and live a life that's more liberated, that in relatively more real and more positive in a way. And renunciation does not mean running away from the world, but it's actually going forth courageously. The meaning of renouncing, especially the Sanskrit word of it, is actually going forth into this spiritual lifestyle, going forth courageously and actively seeking out the truth. So this is what renunciation should be about. And so in humanistic Buddhism, the Chan mind or the Zen mind, the mindful mind, is a pure mind. True Chan practitioners are unaffected with all the worldly toils, power, position, emotion, or even the cycle of birth and death. For a Chan practitioner, to develop meditative concentration, they need the training, experience, and wisdom of their daily life. It's not just in the meditation hall. It should exist in the daily life, in their family, in their office, in everywhere in their daily life. They must be able to pick things up and put them down, allowing what comes to come and what goes to go. So living day to day like this is to live a life of wisdom. And it is one of the wondrous use of meditative concentration. Of course, I'll go through all of this, and if you have any questions, we can also talk about it more. And Chan gives us enlightenment and clear understanding. It eliminates ignorance so that we can appreciate how beautiful life really is. Without all those filters, you'll be able to see the real world or the real life and appreciate it as it is. So the enlightened mind is like a lake with clear water. Without the waves of affliction, you can see all the way to the bottom. And Chan wisdom and intelligence, it is flexible, it is humorous, and it is full of compassion. Chan makes our delusion and affliction disappear. So you can, for those that are new, you can put Chan is a Chinese word for Zen. Zen is a Japanese word. So Chan, Zen, you can think of it as the practice of mindfulness, as a state of mindfulness. So with a Chan sense of humor and composure, an embarrassing word or an awkward situation or an unhappy past event can vanish completely. And Chan is the extra bit of flavor that makes life more wonderful. Chan is like a bright light in the darkened room of our mind that naturally reveals our own intrinsic wisdom. Chan is what allows us to freely observe other people, our own minds, and also the external circumstances. It lets us act with proper conduct, express ourselves correctly, and be free from deluded thoughts. Chan allows us to be content with simplicity, joyful with tranquility, and cherish our own blessings. With Chan, we have no demands, but only persevere diligently towards developing meditative concentration and wisdom. Chan allows us to let go of things with laughter and see through everything without obstruction and attain liberation and also freedom. So with Chan, time is limitless, space is boundless, and there is no distinction between the self and others. Eternity exists in an instant, and a single thought contains the whole universe. You may worry that an enlightened Chan practitioner is getting on in years, but They will tell you they have no time to grow old. You may want them to travel and see the sights, but they will tell you that the Dharma realm is all in your mind. The whole world is in your mind. In reality, internal and external are actually one if you look past duality. A Chan practitioner sees the affliction of the world as flowing water and visualizes the hardship of human life as nirvana. With Chan, even a single moment can be enjoyed for a lifetime and never be exhausted. The mind of a Chan practitioner contains the entire universe, and the life of a Chan practitioner is intimately connected with nature, nature's mountains, rivers, trees, flowers, and grass, its rain, dew, and gentle breezes, as well as the sun, moon, and stars are a wealth we all share. Only by being one with nature can there be eternal wealth. So in actuality, meditative concentration does not belong only to the Chan school or to a handful of Chan practitioners. It belongs to the world. Meditation is like the brightness of a full moon. The full moon in the sky is bright without a shadow, a showy, I believe it's a typo, without a shadowy display. It is soft and unpretentious. The moon shines over all the mountains and rivers equally and shows its perfect fullness while hiding nothing. Meditative concentration is our intrinsic nature. The Buddha said upon his enlightenment, upon underneath the Bodhi tree, all sentient beings have the Buddha nature, and each of us carries with us the treasure of the Buddha nature. Most people do not recognize this treasure, instead fill their days chasing after what they see, hear, feel, and know, pursuing wealth and position, and creating attachment to the five desires as well as the six sense objects. Their true mind is cast among the six realms of existence, and they will undeniably be reborn again and again because of all these attachments. And so in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it's said that always enjoy the practice of gentleness and patience. Find your repose in the four immeasurable of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. If we possess the power of meditative concentration, we can find peace in the truth and will no longer be moved by wealth, passion, fame, slander, suffering, hardship, profit, or anger. No matter how good or bad the world becomes, if the mind remains unshakable, then even if we find our bodies mired in mud, we can still grow into a pure lotus. What is most important in life is to find peace in the tranquility of meditative concentration so that we can live life as Chan practitioner. This is the effect of meditative concentration on life, that is, living life at its happiest. So I believe that is all. I'll talk a little bit more about the metaphor of a lotus. So if you go around our temple, you might find a lot of this iconography or the symbolism that is using a lotus. Underneath the Buddha statue, there is the lotus seat, and in a lot of our sculptures and different arts, you will see the lotus flower. So basically, the lotus flower has been used by the Buddha as a metaphor for the state of this world, because upon his enlightenment, the Buddha had actually pondered whether he should teach Buddhism or not, whether he should teach the truth that he had just realized to the rest of the world or not, because this truth is so different from the knowledge that we see, that the way that we perceive this world, it's so different from how we normally understand it. It's in fact if you really go into it, it's totally 180 degrees. And so the Buddha had he had briefly pondered whether he want to teach Buddhism or whether he will enter into nirvana just right away, just like underneath a Bodhi tree, enlightened, then no point in teaching, goes into nirvana. But there are beings, celestial beings, that appreciate and understand the importance of this teaching or of this Dharma. And so the celestial being from the Brahma king from the celestial realm had traveled down to earth and had asked Buddha to continue to stay in this world and continue teaching Buddhism. And the metaphor that had been used is exactly this. Think of a pond full of lotus flowers. These lotus flowers, some of them might still be in the mud. It is there's the pool, but lotus flower, they will need like at the bottom of the pond, it needs to have mud to be able to grow. And so some might still be inside the mud. They haven't really grow yet. They haven't sprout yet. They might just be a seed. And some of them had grown towards the middle of the water. It haven't gone to the surface, but there are also some that reach the surface, and you can start to see the flower, just like this lotus flower bud that had emerged on the surface of the water. And some might even grow to the top of the water and start to bloom. And these kind of people are the kind of people that will, upon hearing the Dharma, they will understand it, and some might be instantly enlightened because of their ability to understand the Dharma. So these are the lotus flower in their full blossom. And those that are just at the surface, they are able to understand the Dharma, but they require some training, some practice to be able to reach towards that state of enlightenment. So that is easy as well. And some might require more work for those that are still in the water. And for those that in the mud, they might not be able to be enlightened in this lifetime, but still they have the same potential, the same Buddha nature as everyone else, as all living beings. So when they go through the practice in several lifetimes, those that are the lotus flowers that are still in the mud, they are still be able, maybe they listen to the teaching this lifetime and they continue on with their practice, they will still be able to reach toward that the state of enlightenment through several lifetimes of practice. So after hearing this, the Buddha thinks to himself, well, there might be a point of teaching Buddhism, and hence he stayed on for 50 odd years to teach Buddhism in ancient India. And so that's where we get Buddhism from, because of Buddha's compassion of staying on in this world and to be able to teach Buddhism, even though it might be as hard as the Buddha perceive. It's definitely 180. It's totally different from how we understand this world. But throughout the generations, there are countless Buddhists and the masters that have practiced, and like the Buddha himself, are able to achieve towards enlightenment. And also in the Mahayana Buddhism, we also believe that these people will continue on their path to continually practice both compassion and wisdom, to ultimately for they themselves to become a Buddha eventually in the future, to be self-enlightened and to be able to teach this teaching towards other people rather than just to benefit the self. So basically, that is today's class. We still have 10 more minutes that we can open up for Q&A. If there's any question, Anyone would like to ask? Anyone from our class here in Shilai Temple? Everyone is getting different topics okay. Like we have 4 that are joining us today, so everything's okay. Mm-hmm.
How long have you been practicing Buddhism? At what point do you decide this is the path I want to take? Why you join?
Okay. Basically, so the short answer to that is I have been a monk for, so that's 2011, 12 years. Been a monk for 12 years. And the decision to become a monk, it's a long process. It started with my college years. I volunteered. I went to college in Sydney, Australia. There was a branch temple there in the suburbs of Sydney, so I volunteered there, interested in Buddhism. And later, I went to I graduated, went back. Well, I'm born in Malaysia, so went back to Malaysia and continue. I haven't started to work because I think that before I go on with the rest of my life, I wanted to know more about Buddhism, but that into a different path. Short answer to that. If I'm going to details, it's going to be too much for today. Or any other questions for today's class?
Not a question, but I understand. I'm trying to understand now in terms of meditation and concentration that it does take that practice. In order for one to grow within themselves, or rather than to learn how to have that unshakable mind. Because in the past, I've done some volunteer work, but as I stated earlier, just doing volunteer work does not give you that sense of peace that you're really looking for. I'm sure you're helping somebody, or maybe you're volunteering and you feel you're getting this. It's merits. I think it's easy that, but I think for myself, I'm at a state right now learning this, that it does take that, I guess, that daily practice of concentration, or daily practice of meditation, and I guess it'll just take it to the next level beyond that. I guess.
So thank you for your question. So as mentioned just now in the class, is that especially in Mahayana Buddhism, where we emphasize a lot on the practice of the Bodhisattva path that should consist both of compassion as well as wisdom. So if we take a look in other traditions, that is the non-Bodhisattva practices, basically Theravada Buddhism talk about the Bodhisattva path. And for Theravada Buddhism, they focus upon wisdom. And when you focus upon wisdom, then the path, it's basically what we talked about, is precept, the morality, the whole wholesome lifestyle, wholesome livelihood leads you towards the practice of meditative concentration, and hence allow us to be able to develop our intrinsic wisdom, to develop our Buddha nature. So this is the path in all traditions. So, but for Mahayana Buddhism, which is basically the Buddhism that we belong to, we emphasize on the Bodhisattva path, that is not just development of wisdom. We should develop our compassion. So that is where the act of compassion, of helping others, comes in. But the act of compassion is not enough. It helps with the development of wisdom, as in it makes it become a much more warmer person. When we become enlightened, it's not just about ourselves, it's also about the people that are suffering in this world. And so the main course the main course of our practice should be focused upon it's traditionally, or if we are talking about in Theravada Buddhism, it's actually on wisdom. But in Mahayana Buddhism, compassion comes in as a supplement. And in the meal, it'll be the appetizer or the dessert. It's not the main course. So, but it's in Mahayana Buddhism, it's important as well, because when you don't practice compassion, you will end up being cold and self-focused. And to Mahayana Buddhists, that will be just like the Buddha if he hadn't practiced compassion in the past. Of course, the celestial being came down and pleaded to him. He hadn't practiced compassion in his path. He might opt to, even without a thought, just think that this is just too hard. I might as well just enter nirvana. So that will be the path for a person that had just practiced wisdom without the compassion, because you won't have any thought about the suffering for others. So I think it's the path that you're taking now. You had done a lot of works that are benefiting other people, but the core of a Buddhist practice is basically coming back into this 3 steps: precept, meditative concentration, as well as wisdom. So we definitely need to be focused upon this path, because only this path will lead us towards enlightenment. And that's the path that the Buddha had taken as well, for him to be able to reach towards Buddhahood. And so hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so we have time for another question. Anyone has a question? Or well, it's 2 minutes. I can definitely answer a question for that. But
so a lot of different actually have a focus on compassion. But what I'm hearing today also is that Buddhism concentrates on going the middle ground, creating a balance in life. Once, let's say, you achieve enlightenment, is there anything else beyond enlightenment, or is that an unknown? Is there a goal beyond enlightenment?
So, I think I talked about this in our previous class. That is, when we talk about enlightenment, if we talk about enlightenment as in the initial enlightenment that a lot of practitioners will feel when they are in the when they are in a retreat, they might have some instance of epiphany, or that sense, like the light bulb just it goes on. And so after those moments of initial enlightenment, you see some of the points of the teaching. You understand some of the points of the Buddha, what the Buddha is trying to say, but you are still not at the end of your journey. There is still much to do with your practice. You still need to perfect your compassion and your wisdom. So there is still a lot to do. And I remember a book by a famous American Buddhist author, Jack Kornfield. The title of the book is After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. So basically what he's trying to say is, after you have achieved that moment of enlightenment, that initial, you get it, you get what the Buddha is trying to say, but there's still much to do in this world, your daily life. You still need to do all the things, the laundry, taking out the trash and everything. You still need to do all those things in life. So you are still a person living in this world, just that you're a person that sees this world differently. Not it feels like a screen just shattered, and you see this world in another, without a filter. And so it's really hard to describe that state only when you arrive on that state that you understand, oh, that's what it's about. So that you understand why masters, some practitioners will laugh out for days, and some will even cry. All these reactions. When you're there, you'll understand what's happening behind your head. I mean, word fails you when you're trying to describe the state of enlightenment or nirvana, because for you to be able to fully understand it, you need to be there, be at that state. And what the Buddha is trying to tell us is that he is merely a guide. He's guiding you towards the final point. But the final point, you need to walk it yourself. You need to practice it yourself and to truly know what is there. What the Buddha is trying to guide us is that there is nirvana. You can achieve it. That's basically his first teaching after his enlightenment with his first 5 disciples. The Four Noble Truth, truth of suffering, the cause, a truth of the cause of the suffering, what causes our suffering, and the cessation of suffering, which is basically nirvana, cessation of suffering, and the path that leads towards the cessation of the suffering. That is the path that we need to practice for us to be able to reach towards the final point. So that's the Four Noble Truths. And even just by teaching the Four Noble Truths, there are disciples that after a week of practice or 2 weeks of practice, they achieve their enlightenment, their full enlightenment. So it's just like the lotus flower, we are in different states, but it's definitely achievable. There are people that achieve it, and just like what the Buddha said, we all have the Buddha nature. It's just that we need to put in the effort, and we can all achieve towards a final goal. Okay. Okay. Jessica, so how do you actually get back to reality of living when you see and learn about truth of life? Well, the truth of life is not it's not for us to have an assumption of what that is, and it might not be as pessimistic as you thought. Because the truth is the truth. It's not something that is good or bad. It is the truth. It's not by anyone's judgment. Just like the aforementioned 8 winds, gain, loss, sorrow, happiness, pride, and etc. It exceeds it. It transcends duality. It transcends duality. You see the world as it is without all these bias and different attachments that we have. That you see it as it is. Yeah. So it's definitely not seeing the reality and suddenly you're so lost. You won't be lost. You see it without judgment. I would say that you see it without judgment. You transcend the duality. You see the true truth. Yep. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, right. So it's already it's actually 2:04. So thank you, everyone. If there's no more question, we will have another class. Actually, next week is our last class on the 9th. And yeah, if you have any question next week, it's the last chance for you to do so. Okay, thank you so much. Hope everyone enjoy your weekend.